Rain hammered the cracked windshield of Daniel Harper's old pickup as he pulled into the gas station on the edge of town. The blinking neon sign buzzed weakly above him, and the fuel gauge rested dangerously close to empty. He stared at the $10 bill in his hand for a long moment, calculating what mattered more: gas to get to work tomorrow, or dinner for himself and his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. In the end, he bought a loaf of bread, 2 cups of instant noodles, and a small carton of milk. That was all he could afford. Daniel had once imagined a different life. Years earlier, he'd worked construction with dreams of opening his own company. But after his wife passed away from cancer, everything changed. Medical bills swallowed their savings. The house they once filled with laughter became painfully silent. Now, every day was about survival, working double shifts, stretching every dollar, and trying to make sure Lily never felt how close they were to losing everything. As he stepped outside the gas station, carrying the thin plastic bag, he noticed a man sitting near the ice machine. The stranger looked exhausted. His clothes were soaked from the rain, his beard uneven and graying, and his eyes carried the hollow look of someone who hadn't eaten in days. People passed him without looking twice. Daniel hesitated. He knew hunger himself. He knew what it meant to pretend you weren't hungry so your child could eat. He also knew he didn't have enough to spare. The man slowly looked up. "Sorry to bother you," he said quietly. "Do you know if there's a shelter nearby?" Daniel glanced at the bag in his hand, then at the man, then back at the gas station, where people walked by pretending not to notice. Finally, Daniel sighed, softly, and crouched beside him. "I don't know about a shelter," he admitted, "but I've got some noodles and bread. It's not much, but you can share dinner with us." The man blinked in surprise. "You'd do that?" Daniel gave a tired smile. "Someone once helped me when I had nothing. Guess I'm just paying back a debt." The stranger's eyes watered slightly, though he quickly looked away. That night, the three of them sat around Daniel's tiny kitchen table while rain rattled the windows. Lily talked endlessly about school, about a stray cat she wanted to adopt, and about how her dad made the world's worst noodles. The stranger laughed harder than the joke deserved. For the first time in months, Daniel heard genuine laughter inside the house. The man introduced himself only as Victor. He spoke politely, thanked Lily for every piece of bread she handed him, and offered to wash the dishes afterward, despite Daniel insisting he didn't have to. Before going to sleep on the couch, Victor paused. "Why'd you help me?" he asked quietly. Daniel leaned against the doorway. "Because being ignored hurts worse than being hungry." Victor stared at him for a long moment, but said nothing. The next morning, Daniel woke before sunrise for work. But when he walked into the living room, the couch was empty. Victor was gone. Folded neatly on the coffee table was a handwritten note. "Thank you for reminding me who people can be." Daniel smiled faintly, assuming he'd never see the man again. Then life continued exactly as before. Bills piled up. The landlord threatened eviction. Daniel's truck broke down twice in 1 week. At work, his supervisor warned that layoffs were coming soon. Some nights, Daniel sat awake after Lily slept, wondering how much longer he could hold everything together. 3 days later, a loud rumble shook the neighborhood. Daniel looked outside and froze. A line of black luxury SUVs rolled slowly down his street. Neighbors stepped onto porches, whispering nervously, as the vehicles stopped directly in front of Daniel's tiny house. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Then came Victor, except he looked nothing like the broken man from the gas station. His beard was trimmed now. He wore a tailored coat worth more than Daniel probably earned in a year. Confidence replaced exhaustion, and suddenly the entire street seemed to stand still around him. Daniel stepped outside, stunned. What is this?" Victor smiled warmly. "My real name is Victor Bennett." The name hit Daniel instantly. Everyone knew it. Victor Bennett was one of the wealthiest businessmen in America, a billionaire investor known for building a massive technology empire from nothing. His face had appeared on magazine covers and television interviews for years. Daniel could barely speak. Victor approached slowly. "A week ago, I disappeared without security or assistance. I needed to know whether kindness still existed when people had nothing to gain." Daniel stared at him in disbelief. "You tested people?" Victor nodded sadly. "And most failed. He glanced around the worn neighborhood before looking back at Daniel. But you didn't. Daniel shook his head. I only shared dinner. Victor's expression softened deeply. No, he said. You shared your last dinner. What am I thinking? Silence filled the street. Even the neighbors stopped whispering. Victor reached into his coat and handed Daniel a small envelope. Inside was a cashier's check so large Daniel thought he was reading it wrong. His knees nearly buckled. This can't be real. It is, Victor replied. But the money isn't the important part. Daniel looked up slowly. Victor continued, emotion thickening his voice. When I sat outside that gas station, I had already lost faith in people. I built companies, bought mansions, traveled the world. Yet I'd never felt more alone. Everyone wanted something from me. Everyone treated me like a wallet instead of a human being. He looked toward Lily, who stood quietly in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. But your daughter handed me half her sandwich without hesitation. You welcomed a stranger into your home when you barely had enough for yourselves. That kind of compassion is rare. Lily smiled shyly. Victor crouched to her level. Your dad is a very rich man, you know. She frowned innocently. But we don't have money. Victor smiled through moist eyes. There are people with billions of dollars who would trade everything to have your father's heart. Daniel turned away, overwhelmed. Years of exhaustion, grief, and fear suddenly crashed into him all at once. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. For so long, he'd felt invisible, forgotten, like his struggles didn't matter to anyone. Yet somehow, one simple act of kindness had changed everything. Over the following months, Victor quietly transformed Daniel's life. He paid off the house, helped Daniel start his own contracting business, ensured Lily's education would always be covered. But the greatest gift wasn't financial, it was hope. Because for the first time since losing his wife, Daniel stopped believing the world was cold and cruel. He realized kindness still mattered. Even small kindnesses, especially small kindnesses. Years later, Daniel would often tell people the same thing whenever they asked how his life changed so suddenly. It wasn't luck, he'd say. It was one meal. And every time he said it, he remembered that rainy night, when he chose to feed a stranger instead of turning away. Because sometimes, the smallest act of compassion becomes the moment that changes everything, not only for the person receiving it, but for the person giving it too. And somewhere in a world that often feels divided and harsh, humanity still survives in ordinary people willing to share what little they have.